May I introduce you to our topic today. Today we're going to talk about supply chain management success from two very, very professional supply chain managers from Ligentia, which is a data-driven supply chain organization. They are talking about modern supply chains, the supply chains of the future. We have two very experienced speakers. The first one will be Alistair, and for Alistair, I'd like to just tell you that he's the Asian sales director for the company. He's been involved in logistics and all parts of supply chain in London and in Hong Kong and throughout the world. He has a great knowledge of international supply chain and particularly the integration of digital technology to create efficiencies. Looking forward to hearing from Alistair. We'll also hear from the Australian, I think, Managing Director, I better just check, of Ligentia, which is Dean Neville. Dean's got 30 years, it doesn't look like it, but he's got 30 years experience in freight forwarding and supply chain management. He has worked both import and domestic supply chains in both client and service provider. He's got an MBA, Six Sigma, and he's recognised as having great skills in forecasting, demand planning, warehousing and distribution, and logistics optimization. All great issues close to my heart. With that, may I hand over to Alistair and ask him to pick up the baton and lead us through supply chain sustainability. Thank you, Alistair.
Okay, thank you, James. I hope everybody can hear me. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, my colleague Dan was unable to join this session today, but I'm here, so I'm very grateful to take his place to talk to you about some of the observations that we've seen in the market, focusing specifically on the environment created pre and throughout this COVID era. Also, we want to touch on how we are supporting some organizations transition into this new normal and what challenges and opportunities this brings to international supply chains, especially those within the pharmaceutical industry. And it's important to note that we're also eager to learn and continue to develop further. So to that end, if you'd like to share any of your experiences in the chat functions available in this webinar, from my side, it's very welcome. Before we get into all of that, let me firstly begin by introducing our company, just so that we can set the scene and some context about what we actually do day to day. Ligentia is an international supply chain management company. We help our clients move their goods anywhere in the world from A to B. Supply chain management is such a vast term that encompasses so many areas in the product life cycle. So to be specific, Ligentia is managing not just the physical cargo flow from manufactured to delivered, but almost more importantly, we manage the information attached to all of the areas in the supply chain. We will touch on this in more detail later, but it's the information or the data that is key to what we're doing and the difference that we are making. So just in terms of some high-level numbers, we are a 24-year-old company. Next year, we celebrate our 25th year anniversary. We have a team of approximately 500 supply chain experts in our workforce. Per year, we manage, on behalf of our client inventories, approximately £4 billion in stock value. Our typical services include international freight solutions, so sea freight, air freight, rail freight, and road freight. We handle contract logistics, warehousing, and third-party logistics services. And these services aren't just isolated to one particular region. We have a global footprint of Ligentia-owned offices and a community of global partners. So in recent years, we've been on a journey to change the way that we do things. James mentioned before that the landscape is rapidly evolving. Yes, this year has been tough with the challenges presented by COVID, but even if we consider just the last 5 years, supply chains have been under so much pressure due to changing consumer habits, looming trade wars and political conflicts affecting manufacturing, sourcing, landed costs. We decided that it's time to rethink the way that supply chain and cargo management works. We saw an opportunity to make it open and easy and to embrace a digital transformation, not simply just to drive down the cost, but fundamentally to enhance the customer experience when managing supply chains. I'm just going to change the slide. Give me a second. There we go. So it brings us to today and the vision that we have for the new generation of supply chain management. Tap, tap, move is referring to the goal of how we want to manage international operations, as simple as a few taps we have on our mobile devices. The vision is a full transformation of international supply chain using the latest technology to provide true end-to-end visibility. It will allow teams much closer collaboration, reduce lead times, as well as sitting inventory, and importantly, minimizing any environmental impacts on the supply chain. Tap, tap, move. Okay, let me change the slide. So how are we actually going to do this? Well, there's no better way to showcase this than by looking at the way that COVID-19 pandemic has unfolded. What we've noticed in our market base and the new businesses that we are dealing with this year is that there is a clear-cut divide between those organizations who have weathered well and those who haven't. And the difference between the two comes down to effective decision-making. And what do I mean by this is decision-making that is fast, accurate, and reliable. Now, if you think about your own supply chains, how quickly do you think that you would be in a position to make decisions that would have a meaningful impact on the way that you source, forecast, for example, route your cargo flow, or to hold inventory because your whole market has closed? The winners that are coming out of COVID, that I mentioned before, made a series of all of these decisions and implemented their solutions within a 48-hour window. The ones that are struggling are either trying to still make those decisions or there's just some background noise there. So the ones that are not weathering so well are the ones that are still trying to make those decisions or closing their doors. So in today's marketplace, as James mentioned, competition is not merely organization by organization, but supply chain versus supply chain. If you have the competitive advantage in your supply chain, you're going to outperform those without. So how do you make decisions that are fast, accurate, and reliable? The answer, simply put, comes down to data and the quality of data. The next question is well, how do you get the data? Well, here at Ligentia, we have developed our supply chain technology in a way to harness the data. But actually, we all know that adoption of technology is challenging even at the best of times. We've worked with many organizations who are just beginning their digital transformation projects. And as good as the technology is, without the people behind the adoption supporting the cause, it remains a big hurdle. Which is why when we talk about how we do what we do, we always refer to the technology in the team. It is the supply chain experts that we have that drive those actionable insights and expert advice. And this is testament to the 15+ years that we've been showcasing our technology with our clients into becoming a leading international supply chain platform. So talking a little bit more about how we drive with data, this year we have launched our customer hub, and you can see a piece of this on the screen. Let me just change the slide. Cute. Sorry. The hub is the focal point for all of our customer communications and links. Each of our clients have their own unique login and access to 6 key areas that involve pieces of information relevant to their supply chains. So for example, supply chain visibility accesses the end-to-end platform, which is mapped across the entire purchase order lifecycle using real-time data. FAQ and knowledge base houses all relevant documents or articles for easy access that is required across all of their teams. So things like vendor operation procedures, commercial agreements, SLAs, targets, etc. is all in one easy to use access point. One of the most well-received functions of the customer hub is the communication funnel, which we've integrated into various social media platforms to have inbuilt chat functions to help our customers connect with our teams. This is a bid that we have to help drive down fragmented pockets of information that can often be housed in things like email silos. We still support email communications, but we will now open it up to things like WhatsApp and WeChat too. Here in China, this is almost revolutionary in terms of vendor engagement, where WeChat is so prominent and ingrained in everyday life. So in terms of the data and information, based on the interaction inside the hub, the technology continually updates the information inside it. This autonomous analytics ensures that relevant information is easily found and pushed to the users. The data we now have presents us really powerful customer behavior insights. It allows us to continually improve our services and be more effective to supporting our customers. Our goal focused on improving the fundamental customer experience to manage their supply chains. So bringing it all back to how we've managed through a crisis like COVID-19, what's on your screen now is just a snapshot of how we've seen it play out with a number of our enterprise accounts. So just after Chinese New Year, when China began to close down, we worked closely with all of our clients and issued them and published a list of all the forecasted purchase orders over the coming weeks and months, which would have been affected by the closures. With this information, we analyzed the critical path milestones of each purchase order to get a better understanding of all the potential exposures. We worked openly with our clients to develop the strategy and the contingency to reduce as many liabilities as possible in the evolving situation, which turned out to be things like distribution channels closing, ports closing, capacity squeezing. You know, space on airlines and carriers was an absolute premium. I'm sure everybody has experienced this. We had a big work here in China, a big piece of work liaising with the upstream vendors in China whose orders were quickly being cancelled. You know, they had obligations to ship out cargo, but they couldn't physically get them moving. They had nowhere to hold their stock. So as a supply chain management provider, how can we support this with our network of warehouses? You know, and detention in transit options with our steamship carriers and things like this. So once the strategy had began rolling out, we were able to continuously monitor the performance with real-time data, keeping close, balancing the cost and the risk and reporting everything to our customers, as well as pivoting where necessary. The point is that we're able to confidently action the strategy, as well as offer a flexible solution to keep up with the aggressive and daily changes in the market. So I hope that gives you a bit more information about what we do and how. I'm going to hand over to Dean now to go into a bit more detail about how this applies to the pharmaceutical industries and some further observations. So thank you for your time. Dean, over to you.
Thanks very much, Ali, and good afternoon to all in attendance. We hope you're well, and to carry through here, really taking forward from sorry, I apologise. Was looking to move that forward to the next screen. Anyway, a little too far. Performance improvements, observations, and sharing just I guess our observations in relation to the circumstances and the challenges that we're all experiencing today within our supply chains, as it relates to both pharmaceutical and medical supplies. In many ways, these supply chains are really not a great deal different to those that we see in other industry verticals where we support. Anything in terms of a direct sourcing model, the challenges that are continuing to be sustained with legacy models, not having sales and operational planning processes joined up within our organisations, perhaps not looking at our vendor management in a more critical way, with a view to assessing those on an ongoing basis, how we actually control those relationships and those sourcing channels that are being used to source the product and import from those source markets into home destinations here in Australia. Critical paths not being necessarily as well mapped as perhaps they otherwise might be. Milestones as they progress through those critical paths. Do you have alert triggers built into notification platforms? How is that data and that information being transmitted through to you? Do you get that in a timely manner in order to be able to react in a more positive sense? Accountability of the decision-making processes within the supply chain, and how are you contending with those? The visibility overall in terms of your critical path. These are all more legacy challenges that we experience, and the observations that we have from international supply chain services. Then adding in the challenges that we have today with COVID, even more red tape, both at origin and destination, higher freighting costs than what we've probably ever seen, or it's certainly in the more recent decades of international transport. We're seeing freight costs at this point in time at levels that are unprecedented. Longer production lead times as a consequence of COVID and the necessary protection that's been protection measures that have been taken at production sources. The air and shipping service operators that we utilise within industry, whether that be on client side or on service provider side, those airlines and those shipping line platforms that we depend upon to bring product out from source to home markets, that those entities are battling to survive now. They experience things like crewing challenges, environmental conditions, so on and so forth. So the conditions in general that are facing pharma and medical industries, in fact all industries today, we've never seen more challenging times than what we have. I wanted to move that along. Adapting to the new normal within our businesses and our environments. I'm sharing here with you a number of category headers that we believe are essentially the elements that will form up your control towers in an already ultra competitive environment, both globally and regionally. These pandemic event that we're having to experience and navigate our way through, the national and state protective measures taken by governments to protect our communities, the impact on supply chains and bringing product to home market, the circumstances and the challenges that we have today as businesses and as practitioners within our industry verticals, that we've probably never experienced things to this level of challenge in our lifetimes. Looking at what the new normal actually entails today, and some headers here, as I alluded to earlier, things that we should be looking at in order to be able to not only continue to navigate our way through COVID, but also, and equally as importantly, how we're actually going to transform our businesses as we move forward. So looking at your critical path and the milestones that are involved in that critical path, your vendor management, how are you actually doing it? What tools are you actually using to be able to truly manage the performance of your vendors? And I'm not just talking about checking on production dates and so forth, really digging into the relationship that you enjoy with that vendor or that vendor pool, and ways of being able to drive additional performance from it. Speed to market, essentially the shipping function from source to final destination, whether that be to destination port or through to retail shelf location. The data platforms that are being used to capture all of that critical path information, and as it relates back to your procurement functions, how are you actually doing it? Challenge it. Talk with practitioners that have the capacity to be able to help you influence positively the changes necessary to sustain your businesses as we move and move through the balance of COVID and into what the new normal is going to look like at some point in the not too distant future. Forecasting, what are you doing with sales and operations planning? The collaboration, the new sharing economy that exists more so now perhaps than ever before, and ways of being able to release cost out of your businesses by partnering with outsourced entities that are capable of adding value into your supply chain and your retail proposition. The environmental and the ethical standards that we all have to now comply with, and specifically your IMS systems for quality, health, environment and safety. Do you actually have those engaged within the business today? And if not, how are you going to actually navigate out to bring those type of control mechanisms into your business to help you actually drive the business forward? Reduction in costs, big topic. Perhaps that's a conversation for another day. And alternative sourcing avenues that are potentially available for you and for all of us as we move into the future. Truly looking at those new markets which are opening for pharma and medical supply through other parts of the world, perhaps other than with our friends in China. Apologies again. Monique, would you mind moving that screen for me, please? Thanks very much. And as Ali had spoken quite in detail too, in terms of the data of your supply chains, and particularly of that critical path, how is that actually being captured? How is it actually being interpreted and analysed? Are you doing, or do you have the means and the tools at your disposal to not only capture that data and own that data, but truly actually interpret it and overlay it back into your decision-making processes from upstream to downstream? And it's really not an overnight solution. It requires analysis and understanding. And moving along to the next slide, please, Monique. Thank you very much. The comprehension of all of that, the upstream challenges that we have within the businesses today, and truly opening up the visibility that you have with both your vendors, those overseas challenges that the vendors have to comply with in terms of their home markets and the way that they actually manufacture your goods, through to the way that we then dovetail that experience and that data throughout the supply chain to bring your product to home market. Using data in a more analytical sense and overlaying that back into your supply chain brings intelligence into your forecasting, into your demand planning, even through into your merchandising components of the business. Unlocking the connectivity between your milestones within your critical path, it really will help to lead towards a more robust pathway between your upstream sources and your home market. Visibility improvement and dynamic control of your supply chain are objectives that we should all be working towards together, and doing it in a more controlled sense, running your inventory systems as leanly as possible, but without obviously harming the capacity of your supply chain. Next screen, please. Thank you very much. So we thought here we'd just share a quick case study with you to help, I guess, enrich a little more around rapid response. Red Oak Medical, they have manufacturing partnerships across China, and during the onset of COVID, particularly as it began to impact us here in Australia, late February into early March, Red Oak were engaged or enlisted by both state and federal agencies with a view to bringing to market significant quantities of isolation and surgical gowns. That supply chain needed to be ramped up very quickly, inclusive of all of the TGA approvals that were necessary with those products, medical face masks, and other medical PPE that was desperately needed on frontline and to replenish both state and federal emergency stockpiles. They went to the marketplace. They found it very difficult through conventional service provider platforms to be able to deploy a solution rapidly. They needed both technology and physical service fulfillment. Ligentia was engaged ultimately by Red Oak Medical, and in addition to a number of other clientele that we're fortunate to service at this point in time in bringing product into Australia. In total, we ended up implementing rapidly, within only 48 hours, an integration feed from their ERP system into our own, so that we could open up visibility of that critical path and all of those various vendors or factories from which they were actually sourcing their products across China and other parts of Southeast Asia. Turned into a relatively significant project all up. And we ultimately flew into Australia in excess of 100 odd airframes across a very narrow window of time, and quite a few thousand TEU of containers worth of not just medical PPE, but other medical applications, mask manufacturing machines, ventilator equipment, and so on. The point, I guess, here is in terms of the rapid response and the capacity to be able to turn on a supply chain solution from an agile perspective. As a practitioner and also having worked on customer side, it was our pleasure to essentially be that involved in working towards supporting frontline services here in Australia. If we move through to last slide, please. So importantly, what are some of the learns that we've taken out of all of this? What are some of the insights that we're capable of sharing with you as practitioners in supply chain, specifically in pharmaceutical and medical services? What does good look like? The qualities and the characteristics of high-performing agile supply chains, and we've listed a series of them out here for you. Talking to your environmental conditions, high-performing supply chains typically will display most, if not all, of these characteristics within their businesses today. They have strong foundations in both cash reserve and business plan. They have agility within their businesses, and by agility, I'm talking about the capacity to be able to utilize data, utilize in-house resource, partner and engage with extraordinary participants, whether they be service providers or consultancy organizations that also have the capacity to then partner back into that business and help them achieve an outcome. They do that with qualified data. The data is commonly owned by the principal, and they're using it in a constant decision-making process within their businesses. They embrace collaboration. We talk about collaboration from the perspective of working dynamically with those suppliers of goods where the products are being sourced from, challenging those entities on a consistent basis, looking to the service provider or providers of international freight services, order entry, customs clearance, wharf cartage, even down to warehousing and 3PL services domestically across ANZ, utilising the best of what's available in that partnership network collaboratively to achieve the right outcome for the businesses. Driving costs out, robust QHSE-MSs or IMSs, integrated management systems. They don't necessarily have to be ISO accredited either. Simply, those systems are designed to help navigate and control your business's operation. By using those types of disciplines within the business, which are documented, helps all of the team members within a business work together to achieve a common goal. Businesses with really dynamic supply chains and that are building pathways to be able to push forward into the future, embracing continuous change and adopting agility. They rarely ever procrastinate. You will find that you can go away and spend significant amounts of time and resource to endeavour to make actual robust plans to be able to implement to your businesses. The likelihood is that those best made plans, you might not ever actually get there. Start today. Celebrate the successes along the way and reward and acknowledge the efforts of the team that are involved. And that's just not the individuals within your own businesses. Truly wrap your arms around your enclosed supply chain. Your vendors play a significant part in that. The upstream components of how you actually bring product from those source markets. Don't leave it in the hands of your overseas vendors to actually get the cargoes to you at destination. Change your Incoterms. Navigate and control your supply chain as best that you possibly can. It is an experience and an observation of those best supply chains globally and domestically here in Australia, inclusive of New Zealand, of course, and how those businesses actually operate in terms of best in class. Closing out there, just a nice comment. Thank you for your time this afternoon. It's genuinely appreciated. We have the capacity to be able to share more with you, and James and Monique will obviously share additional information through ASCI's web facility and also through their LinkedIn profiles for the business. So once again, thank you very much, and I'll now hand back to James.
Thank you, Dean, and to Alistair. What a delight to have you with us today, because that was some pretty crunchy, detailed facts over a short period of time. I thought it was great. Opportunity to ask some questions of Dean and Alistair now. There's a few have come in already, but please forward them to that Q&A box down the bottom if you have questions for them. Monique's just put a prompt up to everyone to type it in here. First question, let's go to Dean. You mentioned, I was particularly impressed by the control towers and your comment about the freight costs and larger, longer lead times. How can the people listening today understand how best to manage that? I know you mentioned data, but how do you manage difficult disruption, chaos, against the freight costs going up and the production times going out? It seems to be an unmanageable situation.
It is a challenging one, certainly, James, and not suggesting for a moment that we have all of the answers, but sharing some insights there as it relates to production lead times being exaggerated as a consequence of the world that we're in and the epidemic that we're endeavouring to sustain our businesses through presently. The data and the visibility platforms that are available in the marketplace have the capacity to be able to at least provide that level of transparency within the business. As manufacturing begins to restore itself, ordering in smaller quantities more often, using consolidation services, shipping product from those home source locations, from the source locations, I apologise, to where the product is actually needed. So don't bring it in through a national distribution centre facility and then incur additional legacy time in transiting that cargo to where it's ultimately got to go. Land it at the closest port, nearest to where the cargoes need to be. As it relates to the costs, we have some very clear, I guess, views in relation to that. We do, rightly or wrongly, right now, I'd suggest to you that the costing on air freight into Australia and New Zealand and the costing on ocean freight into Australia and New Zealand, there is an end in sight as to when that will restore back to more normal costs. But as it stands today, they are high. Being able to leverage collaboration and partnering with entities that have the capacity to help you actually navigate those costs, understand what those costs are in terms of future provisioning, and roll those into your landed cost estimations, and using landed costing tools is another way of being able to at least help to stop gap.
Yeah, some good tips there. I love the transit, avoid transit, manage your costs, stay on top of your logistics, all are critical at this stage. I've got a question for Alistair. Michael asks, how do you see yourselves in the market? Who do you see are your primary competition? Are you benchmarking against the DHLs and DBSs of the world, or more like a WiseTech global type operation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that do we compare ourselves to the likes of DHL and DB Schenker is, of course, we share similar services, international freight transportation and so forth. But obviously we're a lot smaller scale to those global conglomerate companies. And actually the benefit that brings to us is that things like developing internal strategies and adopting a digital transformation and really pushing that through our whole organization and out to our clients is that we can action these changes at a much faster pace. We have a lot less internal levers to go through to get decisions like this signed off quite quickly. We have a very lean management structure, and we're quite open in terms of what we're doing internally. In terms of WiseTech global type operation, I mean, yeah, in terms of a pure software solution, no. It's worth noting that we actually also using WiseTech Global as our internal ERPs, but we decided to develop our external customer-facing supply chain software solutions to enhance that rich level of data, something that WiseTech CargoWise One had a limitation on. So we are developing upon our service compared to what WiseTech is doing as well. And also just on that point, in terms of what I mentioned before is the technology, but it's also to do with our team and our people internally, right? So we have the customer-facing and customer success teams that actively go out to speak with our clients, have those relationships, not just with our home market clients, but also here in China and your vendor bases, to really understand and acknowledge the challenges so that we can help develop a strategy together. Michael, thanks for that question. I hope that answered it.
It leads to, as a good answer, it leads to the next question, which is how was the take up of the hub? Did your client base see the hub as a good addition, or was it a slow build?
So when we were developing the hub and the idea behind it, we started with the goal of fundamentally trying to enhance, as I mentioned before, the customer experience. We knew that something had to be done. International operations is challenging at the best of times, not least when you just look at the way that information is shared. Email exchange, searching for a subject. I've got 3,000 POs moving this week. I can't spend so much time to individually check each PO. So when we looked at developing the customer hub, we knew that was the goal that we needed to fix. When we rolled it out, of course, this is a sensitive change. Any change management piece is quite sensitive. We had select maybe 10 or so key clients of ours that we were very open about the transition. They bought into the idea and they acknowledged that it was a challenge for them as well. So we trialed it with them over a series of months. And of course, there was learning opportunities out of it. We developed the scope together. And actually now they're very appreciative of the kind of insights that we're gaining out of it. So one of the, and I mentioned it before, the analytics and the autonomous learnings that the system brings us. We thought that when we rolled this kind of thing out, we would have a very good idea of the kind of inquiries that we were getting. So for example, where is my container? These kind of level of requests that we were getting. And we can categorize the requests that are coming through. We could post the answer before you've even had a chance to ask them. But actually, after we reviewed it, the type of queries that we were getting coming through to us on a near daily basis was completely different. And we weren't thinking down that level. Well, now we know that with that data, with understanding that this is the request that actually that the customers are asking us, let's delve into this more. Let's develop a way to post that information so that on Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. it's already visible on the home screen for all those clients. And interestingly, it was surrounded landed costs, duty rates, tax changes. So that level of insight that we got into our behavior, into our customers' behaviors was quite valuable. And it's helping us, again, progress our customer service.
Goodness me, you're not talking about asking your customers what they think, are you? Goodness. Then picking up on that landed cost, last comment of landed cost from Alistair, how did the pharmaceutical industry handle that increased cost of extra freight costs, extra production costs? They had, I imagine, a lot more sales. Did volume overcome the need for cost management, or was there still pressure on cost in the supply chain?
Oh, look, there's certainly still a significant amount of cost there that, James, that I think you would find most of the audience and certainly practitioners and retailers in general have really had limited choice other than to swallow that additional cost that's been forced onto to industry and supply chain during this COVID experience. Not all, but certainly we are seeing plenty, unfortunately, that have had limited choice other than to bear those additional costs at this point in time. I guess the payback will come through perhaps a loyalty experience, but today, yeah, the answer to the question.
Yep. That's good. There is an overriding question here, which I'll come back to both of you shortly. The question is, what, in just a few sentences, what are the key learnings that you individually, you personally, have taken from the COVID impact on supply chain? So what are the learnings for you? And also, same question to Alistair. But before you answer that, Monique, perhaps you might like to share the poll results, and the boys can talk to what we're seeing there.
Yeah, well, certainly those polling responses are exactly what we would expect them to be.
I'm surprised if you go down to question 3, the question about the challenges to adopt change. It seems like supply chain's still not ready to adapt change.
And we see that commonly, James, unfortunately. And it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. businesses within industries, whether they be pharma, medical supply, or other industry verticals, those that are embracing change today during crisis events as what we're experiencing, those that have got healthy balance sheets, adequate cash reserves, looking at new ways of being able to redevelop and transform not just their supply chains, but their business proposition. Those are the ones that have an appetite to constantly challenge the norm, so to speak. It's a prerequisite in terms of healthy ongoing survival of businesses and next generation. Those that choose not to, suspicion being that perhaps it could well be not such a bright future for entities that are not embracing those, I guess, drivers towards transformation.
Well, that's a bit scary, Dean, in that 24% of respondents said that we have limited resources to implement new ways of working.
Well, that's where collaboration and outsourcing perhaps becomes a very opportune time to have those discussions again. Businesses are under pressure. The days of actually having in-house supply chain towers with bricks and mortar facilities, labour forces to operate warehouses, when it's not core fundamental of the actual product and businesses offering. Look at ways of being able to navigate towards collaboration with an external partner that does that as core competency of their business. Allow them to bring you on that journey towards transformation. Look at entities that have the capacity to help you drive with your data transformation, capturing your data, reporting that data back to you objectively, doing it in a collaborative sense. And I could talk on for hours in relation to this, James, but hopefully those few observations there might actually lead towards assisting those businesses that desire change, perhaps don't necessarily have the capacity within house, and a way of being able to look at still transforming through collaboration and outsourcing.
I think ASCI would agree with you totally there. Certainly I agree with you totally. It's an end-to-end supply chain. It's about alliances. It's about collaboration. It's about your full environment, not just within your four walls. Great answer. Thank you, Dean. In my opinion, a good answer. Alistair, did you want to talk to the poll at all? Was there anything that jumped out at you?
I think just to follow on from what Dean's saying, it is really interesting to see the responses, although I wouldn't say it's much of a surprise to me. So everyone who's put some feedback into these polls, thank you for sharing your point of view. What I would say is that, you know, we speak to a lot of organizations, certainly this year as well, a lot more organizations who are looking to action some sort of change or just review what they're doing or how they can, you know, mitigate, you know, liabilities or reduce costs. And, you know, one of the good things about working in this industry, personally speaking, is that we do get a lot of experiences in other industries, and we can relate that back to other experiences with customers that we have. So again, to that extent, we're sharing the knowledge on a day-to-day basis. But what I would say is that if you are looking to review your supply chain, review your operations, first of all, you obviously need to engage the key stakeholders into who's going to be responsible and affected by the necessary changes. And that's not necessarily just a executive level, you know, in terms of change management, and certainly in case of supply chain, it is far reaching from people on the desk level, warehouse level, you know, in the executive team. So, you know, finding out who to speak to and who is relevant to these discussions is definitely going to help. And then secondly, what we need to understand is, what are you up against? You know, are you trying to do this to save money, to be more agile, to grow, to enter a new market? look at these targets and look at these, what you're trying to achieve, and then slowly break it down into what is achievable in short term, what is long term, what are the opportunities. And one of the things that we've been doing this year is having a lot of these conversations. So we've developed quite a robust scope document that we can help guide our clients through making these basic due diligence if they're ready for the change. So it is a big project. If you want to look at the whole vast supply chain operation, break it down, make it easier, make it digestible, and ultimately speak with partners that you believe are going to be able to help you and that you've got a good relationship that can help you through this change. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Dean, both of you, for joining us and the ASCI community today. We really appreciate your intelligence and also insights into what's been happening in your world. We will continue some Q&A after today's webinar in our closed LinkedIn group for the pharmaceutical special interest group. So we'll invite you guys to join that and continue the conversation there. So thanks, ASCI members, for joining us. Thanks, Dean and Alistair.
Thanks, guys. It's been a good session.
Thanks very much. Take care.
For next week, you'll see we're continuing our innovation series, and we will have hosts Roy Hill join us and share their case studies. So as always, here is the registration link, and we look forward to seeing you again same time next week.